Everyone, my name is Lola Ninburg, and this is my second presentation, Global Human Rights and Security Issues. Human trafficking. Human trafficking is the trade of humans for the purpose of forced labor, sexual slavery, or commercial sexual exploitation. Human trafficking can occur within a country or transnational. The number one state for human trafficking is California. California has consistently had the highest number of human trafficking cases. 1,334 cases were reported in 2021 while 1,507 cases were recorded in the previous. More than 27 million people are trafficked worldwide at any given time, according to the United States Department of State. While boys and men are victims as well, most individuals identified as trafficked for both labor and commercial sex are women and girls. Often, a child is forced to have sex 20 times per day, 6 days a week. Trafficking usually occurs in hotels, motels, online websites, and at truck stops in the US. About 50,000 people, primarily from Mexico and the Philippines, are trafficked into the US annually. There are more than 40 million human trafficking victims worldwide, including men, women, and children trapped in forms of modern slavery. From forced labor to sexual exploitation, human trafficking occurs in nearly every country around the globe, stemming from both in-person and online targeting. Labor rights. The International Labor Organization is a specialized agency of the United Nations that works to promote and build international consensus on labor rights around the world. USTR's labor chapters incorporate references to the country's obligations as members of the ILO and commitments under the 1998 ILO Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work and its follow-up. The fundamental rights addressed in the ILO Declaration include freedom of association, the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining, the elimination of all forms of forced or compulsory labor, the effective abolition of child labor, and the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. Worker rights advocates continue to express concerns about the independence of unions from government or employer control. Workers' rights that speak out and bargain collectively through a trade union of their choice were not always respected. Many countries face many similar challenges: a lack of fundamental labor rights, precarious work, poverty, income inequality, and a push by business interests to drive down wages and working conditions. The most urgent areas of concern in international labor involve child labor, forced labor, and workplace safety. Beyond low wages, workers experience this price squeeze in the forms of wage theft, safety violations, excessive overtime, and violations of the right to organize. In China, a developing country that is known to be a hub for sweatshops due to relaxed labor laws, high population, and low minimum wage. The minimum wage is set to be raised by approximately 7% in 10 provinces by the end of 2018. Civil and political rights. The right to vote, the right to a fair trial, the right to government services, the right to a public education, and the right to use public facilities. The right to liberty and security of the person and freedom from arbitrary arrest or detention. The freedom from prison due to debt, the right to equality before the law, the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, and to have a fair and public hearing by an impartial tribunal. Further analysis by the Economist Intelligence Unit shows that 90% of countries have stagnated or declined in their civil liberties score since 2012, while Amnesty International highlights repression of dissent as one of the key global trends in human rights abuses in 2021 and emphasizes the attacks Global freedom declined for its 17th consecutive year in 2022 as 35 countries suffered deterioration in their political rights and civil liberties, according to a new report released today by Freedom House. Recent waves of voter suppression laws across the United States put minorities and other vulnerable populations at further risk, and the online ecosystem, rife with misinformation and disinformation, continues to sow distrust among our citizenry and threaten many of our democratic institutions. Countries like Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen have the lowest human freedom index scores, with scores of 3.66, 4.03, and 4.08 respectively. These countries are plagued by political instability, authoritarian regimes, and several severe restrictions on personal and economic freedoms. Human migration. In the past decade, the global refugee crisis has more than doubled in scope. In 2022, the UNHCR announced that we had surpassed the 100 million mark for total displacement, meaning that over 1.2% of the global population have been forced to leave their homes. Among these people are over 32.5 million refugees. Migration may be negative for origin countries due to brain drain and the loss of young people. Migration can also cause other problems such as segregation, cultural clash, discrimination, and human trafficking. Negative impacts may include pressure on public services such as schools, housing, and healthcare, overcrowding, language and cultural barriers can exist, increased level of pollution, increased pressure on natural resources, racial tensions and discrimination, gender imbalance, usually more men migrate. Increases in population can put pressure on public services. Unemployment may rise if there are unrestricted numbers of incomers. There may be integration difficulties and friction with local people. Large movements of people lead to more security monitoring. Migrants eventually induce social, economic, and political problems in receiving countries, including increases in the population with adverse effects on existing social institutions, increases in demand for goods and services, displacement of nationals from occupations in the countryside and in the cities. Gender equality and violence. Globally, almost 1 in 3 women experience physical and/or sexual violence in their lifetime, mostly by an intimate partner. This is a stark reminder of the scale of gender inequality and discrimination against women. Throughout the world, women and girls perform long hours of unpaid domestic work. In some places, women still lack rights to own land or to inherit property, obtain access to credit, earn income, or to move up in their workplace, free from job discrimination. Gender inequality examples may include gender inequality in girls' education. Even before the pandemic, girls are more likely than boys to never set foot in a classroom and be denied equal opportunities, child marriage, gender-based violence, and child labor. Gender inequality underpins many problems which disproportionately affect women and girls, such as domestic and sexual violence, lower pay, lack of access to education, and inadequate health care. Freedom of religion. Problems with freedom of religion today include such things as social discrimination, economic disadvantage, and civil disabilities imposed on grounds of religion. Today, it importantly includes coercive forms of psychological pressures such as massive propaganda, brainwashing techniques, and more. Discrimination or stigma. People may be subjected to inequitable action as a result of religious beliefs. This is particularly likely for minority groups. Some people may experience bullying or harassment as a result of their beliefs. Religious worship also leads to a reduction in the incidence of domestic abuse, crime, substance abuse, and addiction. In addition, religious practice can increase physical and mental health, longevity, and education attainment. Though some minimal progress has been made in some countries, such as Morocco, religious minorities continue to be oppressed in China, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and several other countries. In Nigeria, Egypt, India, and Indonesia, many people of faith experience violence, discrimination, and persecution. 41 countries ban religion-related groups. Government restrictions on religion take many forms around the world. As of 2018, Christians face harassment in 145 countries, Muslims face harassment in 139 countries, and Jews face harassment in 88 countries. Respectively, Christians amount for 30% of the world's populations, Muslims account for 24%, and Jews account for 0.2%. The highest overall levels of restrictions are found in countries such as Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Iran, where both the government and society at large impose numerous limits on religious beliefs and practices. Security. The UN continues to promote justice and international law across its pillars of work: international peace and security, economic and social progress. Major threats to global security include international serious crime and criminal networks, global travel risk management and travel security around the world, global hostile environment, and complex regions around the world. We are also confronted with the spread of weapons of mass destruction, cyber attacks, and threats to energy supplies, as well as environmental challenges with security implications. International terrorism, cyber attacks, piracy, attacks on energy supply, as well as man-made and natural disasters are real challenges that extend beyond national borders. Among today's most significant global security risks and challenges, except organized crime, weapons of mass destruction or proliferation, and arms control, are problems mainly related to terrorism, nationalism and pluralism, environment, scarcity resources, and demography and migration. In 2023, these include drive-by compromise, using compromised websites or taking over the user's browser, exploit public-facing applications, exploiting a weakness in the user system such as a bug or misconfiguration, external remote services using a VPN or other access mechanism to connect to the network. Social engineering remains one of the most dangerous techniques employed by cybercriminals, largely because it relies on human error rather than technical vulnerabilities. A common security problem is malware, when an unwanted piece of programming or software installs itself on a target system, causing unusual behavior. The same technology that has been enabled us to modernize and computerize critical infrastructure also brings risk. The ongoing threats of hacks targeting electrical grids, transportation systems, water treatment facilities, etc., represent a major vulnerability going forward. The biggest security concern: cybersecurity threats, social engineering, third-party exposure, configuration mistakes, poor cyber hygiene, cloud vulnerabilities, mobile device vulnerabilities, Internet of Things, and ransomware. Crimes that affect national security: pipeline vandalization, drug trafficking, human trafficking, illegal bunkering, terrorism, arson, importation of expired foods and drugs, etc. The number one national security threat is the ruling Chinese Communist Party, representing both the leading and most consequential threat to U.S. national security and leadership globally. Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines told the Senate Intelligence Committee at its annual hearing on the top threats to the nation. Affects Affecting global securities: hostile nation states, violent extremists, transnational organized crime, unaccountable or abusive governance, weak rule of law, and inter and intrastate conflicts all affect civilian security, international stability, and prosperity and directly threaten U.S. interests and foreign policy objectives.